In the summer of 1980, the Cooper family vanished from their quiet home on Maplewood Lane, leaving behind a scene that would haunt the town for decades. The front door was wide open, the radio still played softly in the living room, and dinner sat on the table, still warm when neighbors first stepped inside. No signs of struggle. No note. Just silence. 45 years later, in 2025, a single clue hidden inside that very house would resurface, one that could finally unravel the mystery everyone thought was unsolvable. Before we dive deeper into this chilling story on missing shadows, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. The Coopers were the kind of family people in Maplewood admired. Thomas Cooper, a hard-working mechanic, and his wife, Elaine, a schoolteacher, lived a simple but content life with their two children, Mark, 10, and Annie, 7. Neighbors often remembered the sound of children's laughter spilling from their backyard, the smell of Elaine's fresh pies cooling on the windowsill, and Thomas's friendly wave as he tinkered with cars in the driveway. Nothing about them suggested tragedy. On the night of July 14, 1980, something inexplicable happened. Around 6:30 p.m., the Coopers were seen having dinner through the large kitchen window, Elaine's roast chicken, Thomas's favorite. At 7:15 p.m., a neighbor passing by noticed their front door slightly ajar, but assumed nothing unusual. By 8 p.m., when another neighbor stopped to drop off borrowed tools, the house was eerily quiet. What they found inside would become the heart of a decades-long mystery. Plates half-eaten, glasses still sweating with condensation, and chairs pushed back as if the family had left in haste. Detectives combed through every inch of the house but found nothing. No forced entry, no footprints, no struggle. It was as if the Coopers had simply ceased to exist. The local police, overwhelmed and ill-equipped, eventually closed the case, marking it as unsolved. Rumors and theories spread through Maplewood like wildfire. Some said Thomas had debts and ran away. Others whispered of something darker, even supernatural. Fast forward to 2025. Agent Daniel Reed of the FBI's Cold Case Division had been assigned to revisit unsolved disappearances. A seasoned investigator with a knack for details others overlooked, Reed was drawn to the Cooper case not only because of its eerie setup but also because of a personal connection. His aunt had been Elaine's best friend. When he walked into the abandoned Cooper home for the first time, the dust-coated furniture and faded wallpaper made him feel as though he had stepped into a time capsule. Something about this place told him the truth was still here, buried under decades of silence. The town of Maplewood, nestled between thick pine forests and a glimmering lake, was the kind of place where nothing truly bad ever seemed to happen, until that summer night in 1980. For the first few weeks after the Cooper family disappeared, the entire community turned into a search party. Neighbors combed the woods with flashlights, their beams cutting through the dense darkness, calling out the names of Thomas, Elaine, Mark, and Annie. Police officers dragged the lake behind their home, while local reporters swarmed the quiet street, their cameras flashing against the faded white paint of the Cooper house. The flashbacks of that time haunted everyone who had lived through it. Elaine's sister, Margaret, recalled the last phone call she had with her younger sibling. Elaine sounded distracted, Margaret had told reporters, her hands trembling. She said someone had been calling the house, but when she answered, there was only silence. I told her to report it. She just laughed and said, "It's probably kids playing around." The night of July 14th started like any other. Around 6 p.m., Elaine was seen pulling clothes from the line in the backyard while Thomas fiddled with a broken lawnmower. Neighbors remembered hearing the children laughing, Mark teasing Annie about her missing shoe, just hours before they vanished. There was nothing ominous in the air. Nothing at all. Then came the silence. By 8:15 p.m., when their neighbor, George Miller, stopped by to return a set of wrenches, the sight inside the Cooper home sent chills down his spine. The food was still steaming, George later testified. The chicken, the bread, it was all there like they just got up and left. But the chairs were tipped. Something wasn't right. And Annie's doll, it was on the floor, face down, near the hallway. I swear, I've never forgotten that image. Detectives from the local police department swept through the house. They found no fingerprints other than the family's, no signs of forced entry, and no blood. The kitchen clock had stopped at 7:42 p.m., the precise moment investigators believed something happened. And then there was the writing. On the kitchen table, carved faintly into the wooden surface, were 3 words: "Don't trust the lake." Nobody knew who had written it. For years, the Cooper case went cold. Theories piled up like dust: kidnapping, runaway scenario, cult involvement, but none made sense. Every lead fizzled. Margaret never stopped searching for her sister's children, but by the late 90s, even she had started to lose hope. Present day, 2025. Daniel Reed stood in that same kitchen, running his fingers over the faint carving on the table. 45 years of dust couldn't hide the unease this house carried. He turned to his partner, Special Agent Carla Hughes. "This place doesn't feel like a crime scene," Daniel muttered. "It feels like it's waiting for something." Carla pointed toward the window. "We should start with the lake," she said. Daniel stared out at the water, now eerily low from the summer's severe drought. For the first time in decades, the muddy shoreline revealed something no one had seen before: the outline of what looked like an old wooden shack, partially buried. The sun dipped low over Lake Maplewood, turning the shrinking waters into a mirror of burnt orange and gold. Daniel Reed adjusted his cap as he and Agent Carla Hughes trudged through the mud, their boots sinking into the thick, wet earth. For decades, the lake had been the quiet centerpiece of the town. Families picnicked on its banks, kids learned to fish in its calm waters. But now, with the drought pulling the water back like a curtain, the lake bed revealed secrets no one expected. "Over here," Carla called, pointing to a jagged wooden structure emerging from the muck. The structure resembled an old shack, its weathered boards blackened with age and moisture. A wooden door, cracked but still intact, leaned halfway open as if inviting them inside. Daniel's gut tightened. He wasn't a man easily rattled. 10 years with the FBI had made sure of that, but something about this place whispered wrong. They pushed the door open. A hollow creak echoed across the empty shoreline. Inside, the air smelled of rot and rust, like time itself had decayed. Daniel swept his flashlight across the cramped interior. Then they both froze. Against the far wall, there were 4 small metal-framed beds, each lined with thin, moldy mattresses. They were child-sized. A single, dust-covered shoe sat near one of the beds. Daniel crouched down, picking it up with gloved hands. It was a small leather Mary Jane, faded pink. "Annie Cooper's," Carla murmured, recognizing it from the old case files. But that wasn't the worst of it. In the corner of the shack, half buried under debris, sat an old camcorder, its lens cracked but still pointing toward the beds. Daniel brushed off the grime, noticing a faded label taped to the side. "Play me." Carla's voice was tight. This wasn't just a hiding spot. Someone brought the kids here. Daniel felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine. He stood, scanning the room. There were scratches etched into the wooden beams above each bed, like someone had been marking days. 7 vertical lines, then a slash. "This is where they were kept," Daniel said softly. "But by who?" Carla glanced at the camcorder. If this still has footage, it could answer 45 years of questions. Flashback to 1980. That same night, hours after the Coopers vanished, a teenage boy named Kenny Lowe was fishing near the lake when he heard something. He would later tell police he thought he'd heard a girl crying coming from somewhere across the water. But he was brushed off. People assumed his story was an attempt to grab attention during the chaos of the investigation. Kenny, now an old man, had never forgotten those cries. Daniel and Carla carefully placed the camcorder in an evidence bag, their hearts pounding. Back at the mobile forensic unit, they hooked it up to a converter. For a moment, nothing but static filled the screen. And then, a blurry image came to life. The footage showed a dimly lit room, the same shack they just stepped into. A young boy's voice whispered something inaudible. Then, faintly, a child cried out, "Mommy?" Carla covered her mouth with her hand. "That's Mark." The screen flickered again, and a distorted figure moved across the frame, tall and broad-shouldered, face hidden under a hood. It stopped, turning toward the camera. The screen went black. Daniel exhaled sharply. Whoever this was, they recorded everything. He turned to Carla, his jaw tight. This isn't just a missing persons case anymore. It's about to get very dark. The next morning, the small conference room at the Maplewood Sheriff's Department buzzed with tension. The old Cooper case files, once collecting dust, were now spread across the table like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be solved. Daniel Reed leaned over the grainy photos from 1980, the dining table with untouched plates, Annie's doll lying on the floor, the open front door frozen in time. Beside him, Carla Hughes rewound the camcorder footage for the 5th time, each flicker of static making her stomach twist. This footage confirms one thing, Daniel said, his voice steady but dark. The Coopers didn't just vanish. Someone took them and kept them alive, at least for some time. Carla nodded, eyes fixed on the shadowy figure captured in the video. We need to know who that man is. The height, the build, he doesn't look random. He looks deliberate. Revisiting the suspects. In 1980, the local police had interviewed more than 20 people in connection with the Coopers' disappearance. Most were quickly cleared, but 3 names had stood out. Names Daniel and Carla now circled in red. 1. Harold Denton, a former groundskeeper who had been fired from the local school for erratic behavior. He lived in a cabin near the lake and vanished just months after the Coopers did. His cabin was never searched thoroughly back then. 2. Walter Griggs, a quiet man in his late 40s who frequently fished near Lake Maplewood. Witnesses described him as odd, with a particular interest in children. His alibi on the night of July 14th had always been shaky. 3. Kenny Lowe, the teenager who reported hearing a girl crying near the lake that night. His statement was dismissed at the time, but Daniel wondered if Kenny had seen more than he admitted. We start with Kenny, Daniel decided. Carla raised a brow. You think he's involved? I think he's the only living witness who might have heard something real, Daniel said. The visit to Kenny Lowe. Kenny Lowe, now 61, lived in a rundown trailer park on the edge of town. When Daniel and Carla knocked on his door, it creaked open just enough to reveal a man with sunken eyes and a weathered face. Kenny Lowe? Daniel asked, flashing his badge. The man's eyes flickered with recognition and a hint of fear. This about the Coopers, ain't it? Carla stepped forward. You told police you heard something that night. We need to hear it again. Every detail. Kenny invited them in, the trailer smelling of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. His hands trembled as he lit a cigarette. I was 15. I was fishing near the lake, just before sunset. I heard a scream, a girl's scream. I swear I heard a man's voice say, "Get inside." But when I told the cops, they said I was making it up. After that, I shut up. Nobody believed me. Daniel studied Kenny's face. Did you see anyone? Kenny hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper. There was a boat just out on the lake. Big old wooden thing. I saw someone tall standing in it, like he was waiting. Carla's eyes narrowed. Could you identify him? Kenny shook his head. Too dark. But I'll tell you this. If the droughts drained the lake, that boat might still be down there. The lake search. By afternoon, divers from the FBI's field team were scanning the shallow lake bed near where Kenny described. Within hours, they uncovered the remains of an old wooden boat, its hull cracked, its surface scorched as though someone had tried to burn it. Inside, they found something chilling, a rusted chain, a child's hair ribbon, and a set of initials carved into the wood, MC. Carla's voice trembled when she saw it. Mark Cooper. New evidence. The ribbon and chain were sent to the FBI lab for DNA testing. Meanwhile, Daniel reviewed the camcorder footage again. Something he hadn't noticed before caught his eye, a faint reflection in the lens. He paused, zooming in. It looked like a ring. A heavy gold ring with an engraving. We need to check the old reports, Daniel said urgently. Did Harold Denton wear a ring like this? The case was no longer just an old cold file. It was alive again, breathing and dangerous. Whoever had done this might still be out there. July 14th, 1980, 6 p.m. The evening air was warm, heavy with the scent of grilled meat and honeysuckle wafting from the neighbors' yards. Inside the Cooper home, Elaine Cooper placed a steaming dish of roast chicken on the dining table. she called out to her children, her voice ringing with that familiar mix of love and command. "Mark, Annie, wash your hands before dinner." 10-year-old Mark came skidding into the kitchen, his dark hair sticking up from running around in the yard, while 7-year-old Annie trailed behind, clutching her favorite rag doll. Thomas Cooper, still in his work shirt from the auto shop, leaned down to kiss Elaine's cheek before taking his seat. It was a simple, ordinary evening, one of the last moments of normalcy the family would ever know. "Dad," Mark said between bites of bread, "Mr. Miller said he saw something weird by the lake yesterday." Thomas looked up, amused. "Weird how?" "Like a man standing out there after dark, just staring." Elaine frowned. "Who would be at the lake at night?" "Mark, you know how stories get around." Annie, wide-eyed, whispered, "Maybe it was the lake ghost." Thomas chuckled, ruffling his daughter's hair. "There's no such thing, sweetheart. Just someone fishing." 6:45 p.m. After dinner, Elaine stood at the sink washing dishes while humming softly. Thomas dried them. Annie played with her doll at the table, while Mark flipped through his baseball cards. Everything was calm, until the phone rang. Elaine picked it up. "Hello." Silence. No static, no click. Just dead silence. "Hello," she repeated, her brow furrowing. Then, faintly, a sound, almost like breathing. She slammed the phone down, unsettled. Thomas noticed. "Wrong number." "Maybe," she muttered, but it felt strange. Someone was there. 7:10 p.m. The family prepared to settle in for the evening. Annie's doll rolled under the kitchen table, and as she bent down to grab it, she froze. "Mommy," she whispered, "someone's outside." Elaine turned sharply. Through the window, a tall silhouette stood at the edge of the backyard, motionless. For a moment, she thought it was just a trick of the light, but then the figure stepped closer. "Tom," Elaine's voice trembled. Thomas walked to the door, gripping the handle. "Stay here," he ordered. 7:20 p.m. He opened the door. The man outside was broad-shouldered, his face obscured by the hood of a dark jacket. "Can I help you?" Thomas called out, his voice firm. The figure didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head as if studying the family. Elaine felt a wave of dread wash over her. She pulled the kids behind her. "Tom, let's just go inside," she urged. And then, without warning, the power went out. The house plunged into darkness. 7:42 p.m. The moment everything changed. The last thing neighbors would later remember was hearing a high-pitched scream, followed by the sharp slam of a door. By the time George Miller walked up to return Thomas's wrenches just minutes later, the Coopers were gone. Dinner plates still sat on the table. The radio was playing softly in the living room, and Annie's doll lay on the floor, face down, as if dropped in fear. Back to 2025, FBI HQ. Daniel Reed closed the old witness statements, exhaling slowly. The flashback details pieced together a chilling timeline. The phone calls, the figure outside, the sudden power outage. None of this had been fully analyzed back then. Carla glanced at him. "This wasn't random, Daniel. Whoever took them knew exactly when and how to strike." Daniel nodded, his eyes dark with determination. "And I have a feeling that the camcorder footage isn't the only thing left behind. If we dig deeper into that shack and the surrounding woods, we might find what the original investigators missed." The following morning, the lake was eerily still, the surface a dull gray under a blanket of clouds. Daniel Reed and Carla Hughes returned to the shack with a full forensic team. The discovery of the camcorder had been enough to reopen the Cooper case officially, and now every inch of the site would be treated like an active crime scene. Daniel stood outside, scanning the structure. The wood was warped and cracked, but the shack had an unsettling aura, as if it was guarding its own secrets. He turned to Agent Harris, the lead forensic investigator. "Focus on the foundations," Daniel instructed. "If this was a holding place, there might be more hidden below." Inside, the team photographed the 4 metal-framed beds and the strange scratch marks above them. Carla examined the marks closely, counting the etched lines. 7 lines here, another 7 over there, she murmured. "This is a tally. Days? Weeks." Daniel ran a gloved hand along the rough wood. They were keeping track of time, which means the family was alive here for longer than we thought. In the corner, the forensic team unearthed a small box buried under rotted boards. Inside were children's belongings, a hairbrush, a pair of socks, and a crumpled drawing of a house with a red roof and 4 stick figures. At the bottom of the page, in a child scrawl, it read, "We miss home." Carla's throat tightened. "Mark or Annie drew this?" she whispered. One of the forensic techs, a young woman named Riley, called out from the far side of the shack. "Agents, I think there's something here." Daniel and Carla hurried over as Riley pointed at a section of the floor where the boards looked newer than the rest. "This doesn't match the age of the rest of the wood. Someone patched this up later," she explained. "Get it open," Daniel ordered. 2 team members pried up the boards, revealing a narrow trapdoor. Beneath it was a set of wooden steps leading down into darkness. Daniel shined his flashlight down, revealing a cramped underground room lined with rusted shelves. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, old blood, perhaps. The space was no larger than 10 feet across. On one wall, there were chains bolted into the ground, their ends broken but still stained with rust. A few broken toys were scattered across the dirt floor, and a torn blanket lay crumpled in the corner. Daniel crouched, studying the ground. This was where they were kept after the shack. "It's a holding cell." Carla's stomach churned. "God, this isn't just a kidnapping. This is something much darker." A small tin box tucked under the shelves caught Daniel's attention. Inside were photographs, old Polaroids with faded colors. The first photo showed the Cooper family at the dining table, but it wasn't taken by them. It was taken through a window. The second photo was of Annie playing in the yard, her face partially blurred. The third was of all 4 beds in the shack, with small figures lying on them. Carla stepped back, goosebumps rising on her arms. Whoever did this was stalking them for weeks, maybe months. Pinned behind the photographs was a scrap of yellowed paper, with words scrawled in jagged handwriting. "The lake keeps its secrets. The water listens. The children understand." Daniel stared at the note, a hard expression on his face. This isn't just some random psycho. This person believed they were doing something bigger, something ritualistic. As the evidence team cataloged everything, Daniel stepped outside for air. He looked at the drained lake bed, now an open wound against the landscape. He couldn't shake the feeling that the person who took the Coopers might have been someone the town knew, someone hiding in plain sight. Carla joined him, holding one of the Polaroids. "There's something else," she said. "Look at this reflection in the window of the dining room. See that shape? That's not just the photographer. That's a ring. The same heavy gold ring we saw in the camcorder footage." Daniel's jaw tightened. Harold Denton wore a ring like that. He's been dead for years, but what if he wasn't working alone? Daniel called HQ to cross-check Harold Denton's old associates. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of the items in the underground room confirmed something chilling. The DNA on the hairbrush and socks matched the Cooper children. They had been here, alive. Carla spoke quietly, almost to herself. "We're not just looking for a killer, Daniel. We're looking for someone who believed they could make an entire family disappear and keep the town silent." Daniel turned to her. "Then we go deeper. Someone in this town knows more than they're saying. And I think I know where to start." The next day, Daniel Reed and Carla Hughes began knocking on doors across Maplewood. The town had changed over the last 45 years. New families had moved in, old neighbors had passed on, but those who had lived through 1980 still carried the weight of the Cooper disappearance. Daniel believed that at least one of them knew more than they had told the police back then. The first stop was Margaret, Elaine Cooper's now 72-year-old sister. She lived in a modest house on the edge of town, surrounded by photographs of the family she had lost. When Daniel and Carla walked in, Margaret's hands shook as she held an old family photo, Thomas and Elaine smiling in front of their house, with Mark and Annie clinging to their parents' sides. "You found something, haven't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel sat across from her. "We found a shack on the drained lake bed. We believe the Coopers were held there, alive, after they disappeared." Tears welled in Margaret's eyes. All these years. I told everyone. I told them Elaine would never leave like that. She loved those kids. But nobody listened. Carla leaned forward. Margaret, did Elaine ever mention anyone suspicious before the night she vanished? Any strange visitors or calls? Margaret's face tightened. She said someone kept calling, but no one was there when she answered. And she once mentioned a man from the lake. I thought she was joking, but now, Margaret paused, her expression darkening. There was a man. Harold Denton. He used to come by Thomas's shop sometimes. Elaine didn't like him. Said he had this way of staring. Daniel exchanged a glance with Carla. Denton was becoming more and more central to the puzzle. Their next visit was to George Miller, the neighbor who had first entered the Cooper home the night they disappeared. Now 80 and living in a retirement home, George still had a sharp memory. I'll never forget what I saw, George said, gripping his cane tightly. The food on the table, the radio playing, it was like they just stepped out. But I always believed they were taken. I saw a boat on the lake that night. Big and dark, like something out of a nightmare. Did you tell the police about the boat? Daniel asked. George's eyes narrowed. Of course I did. But they dismissed it. Said I was old and seeing things. But I wasn't. That boat didn't belong to anyone I knew. It wasn't the Dentons, that's for sure. But Harold, he always had access to the water. He worked maintenance at the old dock back then. As Daniel and Carla continued their interviews, a pattern began to emerge. Several older residents mentioned Harold Denton, but always with a sense of unease, as though saying his name alone stirred up old ghosts. One woman, Mrs. Lillian Foster, whispered, people avoided the Dentons. His father was strange. They said Harold used to watch kids playing from his truck. No one wanted to believe he was dangerous, but after the Coopers, well, everyone kept quiet. Carla frowned. Kept quiet why? Mrs. Foster hesitated, glancing around before answering. Because the Dentons weren't just one man. Harold had a brother, Raymond. He was worse. And Raymond disappeared right after Harold died in that boating accident in '85. Daniel scribbled the name down. Raymond Denton? She nodded. Last I heard, he was living like a hermit in the woods north of the lake. If he's still alive, he'd be in his 70s by now. That evening, Daniel and Carla went back to review the camcorder footage. Zooming in again on the figure, Daniel noticed something new. The gold ring they'd seen had an engraving that read, RD. Not Harold, Daniel said slowly. Raymond Denton. Carla looked at him sharply. If Raymond was involved, he's been hiding for 45 years. He'd know every inch of these woods. And he'd do anything to stay hidden. Daniel closed the file, his jaw tightening. Then we find him before he disappears again. Before heading out, Daniel decided to hold a small town meeting at the Maplewood Community Center, hoping to stir memories. He showed the residents the recovered Polaroids, carefully blurred to avoid showing the children, and the camcorder. The room went silent. An older man in the back spoke up, his voice trembling. I've seen it before. Back when the lake was full, I used to kayak past that area. There were always strange noises at night, like hammering, like someone building something out there. Another voice chimed in. The Dentons used to have a cabin just beyond the lake, past the old logging road. No one's been up there in years. Later that night, Daniel stood on the shore of the lake, the cool breeze cutting through his jacket. This isn't just about solving a mystery anymore, he told Carla. This is about stopping someone who's been living free for too long. Carla stared at the dark woods beyond the lake. Then our next step is clear. We find the Denton cabin. The following morning, the sky over Maplewood was overcast, the kind of gray that made the woods look darker than they really were. Daniel Reed tightened the straps of his bulletproof vest as he stood by the SUVs parked near the old logging road. A team of FBI agents was gearing up, weapons checked, radios tested. Carla Hughes approached with a handheld GPS and a determined look. We've mapped the area, she said. The Denton family cabin is about 3 miles into the forest, but the path's been overgrown for years. We'll have to go on foot. Daniel nodded. If Raymond's alive and living out here, he's been watching the town from these woods for decades. He knows every sound, every tree. They set off, the group of 5 agents moving single file through the dense undergrowth. Branches snapped under their boots, and the air was thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. Every few steps, Daniel scanned the shadows, the weight of the case pressing on him. "Something about this doesn't sit right," Carla whispered as they pushed deeper. "Why would he stay here for 45 years? Why not run?" Daniel's jaw tightened. Some people don't run. They create a world where they're in control. My gut says this is exactly what Raymond did. After nearly an hour, the team came across a clearing. In the middle of it lay a rusted oil drum, surrounded by scraps of fabric and broken toys, small cars, a doll missing its head. Carla crouched down, holding up a faded piece of cloth. "This is a child's sweater," she said, her voice tight. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "He's been here recently. Someone's been keeping this area maintained." Just beyond the clearing, a narrow path of flattened leaves led up a hill. Daniel gestured for silence, signaling the team to follow. The cabin appeared suddenly through the trees, a dark silhouette against the gray sky. It was larger than Daniel expected, 2 stories, though sagging and weather-beaten. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Someone was home. Daniel and Carla exchanged a glance. Carla whispered, "We approach carefully. He's had decades to rig this place." 2 agents flanked the perimeter while Daniel and Carla crept to the front porch. Daniel knocked once. "Raymond Denton? FBI, we need to talk." For a moment, silence. Then a slow, dragging sound echoed inside. Footsteps. The door creaked open an inch, revealing a weathered face, thin and pale, with piercing gray eyes. "What do you want?" the man rasped. "Raymond Denton?" Daniel repeated. The man's gaze flickered. "Harold's dead. You don't need to dig up ghosts." Daniel stepped closer. "We're here about the Coopers. The family that disappeared in 1980. We know you were involved." Raymond's expression hardened. "Leave." Daniel motioned subtly to Carla, signaling caution. "Raymond, if you cooperate, we can help you. We found the shack. We found the camcorder. We know you were there." Raymond's hand twitched near the doorframe. For a second, Daniel thought he saw something metallic, a weapon. Before he could react, Raymond slammed the door shut. "Breach," Daniel ordered. The team kicked the door open, rushing inside. The cabin smelled of smoke, mold, and something bitter, like chemicals. It was cluttered with old tools, scraps of rope, and piles of newspapers dating back decades. Raymond was nowhere in sight. Carla spotted a rug pulled askew in the middle of the floor. She yanked it back, revealing a wooden hatch. "He's running." Daniel pulled it open, revealing a ladder leading down to a narrow tunnel. The walls were lined with shelves holding glass jars, each filled with odd trinkets, broken watches, keys, and children's toys. The team descended carefully, flashlights sweeping across the dirt walls. The tunnel stretched for what felt like forever, until they reached another door. When Daniel pushed it open, they entered a chamber that looked like a grotesque shrine. On one wall, dozens of photographs were pinned, Polaroids of the Cooper family and, chillingly, other children who had gone missing in nearby towns over the years. In the center of the room was a wooden chair with chains attached, stained with rust and age. Carla's face paled. "This isn't just about the Coopers. He's been doing this for years." Daniel took a deep breath, scanning the photos. "And if he's alive, he may still have someone." A noise echoed from deeper in the tunnel, the sound of something heavy scraping against stone. Daniel raised his weapon, signaling the team to move. Suddenly, a figure darted across the far end of the chamber, just out of the beam of their flashlights. It was him, older now, frail, but with a wildness in his eyes. He vanished into the shadows of the tunnel. "Raymond! FBI!" Daniel shouted. "Stop!" But Raymond didn't stop. He slipped into a narrow passage, and within seconds, the sound of a rusted metal door slamming shut echoed behind him. Though they didn't catch Raymond that day, the evidence in the cabin was overwhelming. They collected the photographs, the Polaroids, and the personal items linked to the Coopers. A DNA sweep of the chains confirmed traces of Thomas and Elaine. Back at the command center, Daniel reviewed everything with Carla. "We're closer than we've ever been. He's running scared now. But this isn't just about catching him. It's about finding out what happened that night and why they never came home." Carla looked at the evidence board, her voice quiet. "And maybe, just maybe, giving that family the justice they've waited 45 years for." The evidence team spent the entire night combing through every inch of Raymond Denton's cabin. Dust-covered boxes, locked drawers, and stacks of old papers lined the walls like a forgotten archive of a mind unraveling. By dawn, the cabin looked like a war zone of evidence markers and plastic bags filled with items that might hold the key to the Cooper family's fate. Daniel Reed sat at a wooden table in the middle of the cabin, flipping through a pile of leather-bound notebooks that one of the forensic agents had found hidden beneath the floorboards. The pages were filled with a chaotic scrawl, some entries written in tiny, precise handwriting, others in jagged, frantic lines that tore the paper. "These are his journals," Daniel muttered, glancing up at Carla Hughes, who was leaning over the table, scanning another notebook. 40 years of whatever was going on in his head. The earliest journal dated back to 1975. "The lake speaks at night. I hear it when I close my eyes. It calls for offerings for the ones who won't be missed. I will be the hand that delivers them." Carla shook her head, her expression tight. He believed the lake was talking to him? This is ritualistic thinking, Daniel. It's delusion mixed with obsession. Daniel turned the page. "I saw them today. The family on Maplewood Lane. Perfect, smiling, untainted by the lies of the world. They don't belong here. The lake wants them." Daniel's hands clenched the notebook. This wasn't random. He picked the Coopers because they represented something he wanted to destroy or claim. The journals laid out Raymond's descent into madness like a roadmap. In 1978, he wrote about watching the children and how their laughter echoes in the trees. By early 1980, the entries became darker, describing detailed plans. "I will take them when the moon is low. I will leave the table as it is, so the world will know the lake's hunger." The night of July 14, 1980, he wrote a chilling line. "Tonight, they come to me. The water will hide their voices." Carla's voice was barely above a whisper as she read over his shoulder. This isn't just a kidnapping. He saw himself as part of something supernatural. He believed the lake demanded sacrifices. Among the scribbled madness, Daniel found one entry that made his pulse quicken. "The lake isn't enough. I built the room beneath where the sun can't find them. When the water falls, it will reveal my truth." Daniel looked at Carla. That means there might be more hidden under the lake bed. Maybe something the drought hasn't fully uncovered yet. Carla frowned. Or worse, more victims. In one of the journals, pressed between two pages, was a Polaroid that neither of them had seen before. It showed the Cooper children, Mark and Annie, sitting on one of the shack's beds. They looked terrified, their faces streaked with dirt, but alive. Carla swallowed hard. This proves they were alive after that night. We need to know what happened next. Daniel nodded. If Raymond's been out here for 40 years, maybe there are more clues in these woods. Something tells me he didn't destroy everything. Later that evening, Daniel and Carla met with Dr. Karen Fields, a behavioral profiler from the FBI. She flipped through the journals, her face grim. "This is classic organized psychosis," Dr. Fields explained. "He built a narrative around the lake, convinced himself it wanted sacrifices, and then justified everything he did as feeding it. People like this don't just stop. If Raymond is still alive, he's either preparing for another act, or he's hiding something from his past crimes." Daniel leaned forward. "Then he'll have a pattern, a routine. We need to figure out where he would go if he feels cornered." As night fell, a forensic tech approached Daniel holding a small, rusted key and a weathered map found inside one of the notebooks. The map depicted the lake and surrounding woods, but it also showed two additional structures marked with crude X's. "What are these?" Carlet. Daniel studied the markings. Cabins? Bunkers? If one shack existed, there could be more. The key, the tech explained, had been taped to the back cover of the final journal, alongside one haunting line. "The second room holds the truth. Daniel turned to Carla, his eyes steely. "We're going back into those woods tomorrow. If Raymond built another underground room, that's where we'll find the rest of the story. Maybe even the remains of the Coopers." Carla nodded, though her face betrayed a deep unease. "And if he's there?" Daniel zipped up his field bag, his voice calm but firm. "Then we end this. 45 years is long enough." The morning air was crisp, heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth as Daniel Reed and Carla Hughes led their FBI team back into the woods. The map from Raymond Denton's journal, though crude and hand-drawn, had given them a direction, a trail leading deep into an area where no hikers or locals ventured anymore. Daniel adjusted his radio earpiece, his tone sharp. "Stay alert. If Raymond Denton is out here, he'll know we're coming. He's had 40 years to prepare for this." Carla, walking beside him, studied the trees with narrowed eyes. "He built a whole underground prison without anyone noticing. I don't want to think about what else he's capable of hiding." 2 miles in, the team found signs that the map was leading them correctly. Broken glass jars, rusted tools, and strange wooden carvings of human figures hung from tree branches like grotesque ornaments. Each carving had a small red circle painted over the head, as if marking something significant. Carla tilted her head, examining one of the figures. "This isn't just random junk. These are markers. He's leaving a path for himself, or a warning for others." Daniel's hand rested on his holster. "Let's assume it's both." By midday, they stumbled upon a structure almost swallowed by the forest. An old shack, larger than the first one they'd found near the drained lake bed. Moss covered its roof, and the door was secured with a heavy iron padlock. "Looks like we're here," Daniel muttered, signaling the breaching team. With a single blow from a crowbar, the door creaked open, releasing a stench of mildew and decay. Inside, the shack was stripped bare. No beds, no toys, just walls scrawled with phrases written in black paint. "The lake watches. The silence feeds me. I am the hand of the water." Carla scanned the room with her flashlight. "Daniel, over here." In the corner, half buried under a rotting wooden plank, was another hatch. Just like before. Daniel and Carla led the way, flashlights cutting through the darkness as they descended into the second underground room. This one was larger, with brick walls and a low ceiling. The temperature dropped immediately, the cold seeping into their skin. And then they saw it. Against one wall stood a large wooden table, covered in old Polaroids, rope, and glass jars filled with personal belongings, hair ribbons, watches, tiny shoes. On the other wall were drawings of the Cooper family, each face marked with black excess. Carla's voice trembled. This is where he brought them." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He's been coming back here. Some of these items are recent. He's nearby." A faint creak echoed from above. Daniel froze, signaling silence to the team. Slowly, footsteps descended the wooden steps. Raymond Denton appeared in the doorway, holding a shotgun. His hair was long and matted, his face lined with years of isolation, but his gray eyes burned with a wild intensity. "You shouldn't have come here," Raymond rasped. "The lake won't forgive you." "Raymond Denton," Daniel said, his weapon drawn. "Drop the gun. It's over." Raymond chuckled, a hollow sound that sent shivers down Carla's spine. "Over? You think this is over? The lake takes what it wants. The Coopers belong to it, not to you." The room was tense, every agent's weapon aimed squarely at Raymond. Daniel took a slow step forward. "Raymond, we know what you did. We found your journals, your photographs. We know about the Coopers. You can either end this now, or it will end with you dead." Raymond tilted his head, as if considering the words. "I did what the water asked. I kept them safe from the world. The world is cruel. But the lake is eternal." Carla's voice was firm but calm. "Where are they, Raymond? What did you do to them?" Raymond's lips curled into a faint, unsettling smile. "They're with the water now. All of them." Before Daniel could respond, Raymond swung the shotgun up, firing into the ceiling. Wood splinters rained down as the agents dove for cover. Daniel fired back, the shot grazing Raymond's shoulder. The old man stumbled but didn't drop the weapon. "Raymond, stop!" Daniel shouted, but Raymond bolted toward a narrow passage at the back of the underground room, disappearing into the dark. Daniel cursed, chasing after him with Carla close behind. The passage twisted like a maze, leading to a hidden exit that opened into the woods. Raymond was fast, despite his age, weaving between trees like he knew every inch of the forest. It ended in a clearing near the riverbed. Raymond turned to fire again, but Daniel tackled him, the shotgun skidding across the ground. They wrestled in the dirt, Raymond thrashing like a man possessed. "Let me go! The water needs me," he screamed. Daniel pinned him down, cuffing his hands. "The only place you're going is prison." Raymond lay still for a moment, his chest heaving. Then, in a low, almost gleeful tone, he whispered, "You'll never find where they sleep. The lake hides them." As the team secured the area, Carla picked through Raymond's pockets and found a small metal key, identical to the one found in his journal. "This opens something," she said. "Maybe the final piece of this nightmare." Daniel, standing over Raymond, felt the weight of the case pressing harder than ever. "We have him, but we still don't have them." "Not completely." The sun was setting over Maplewood when Daniel Reed and Carla Hughes returned to the drained lake bed, Raymond Denton now in federal custody. The old man's cryptic words, "You'll never find where they sleep. The lake hides them," echoed in Daniel's mind like a haunting refrain. Carla stood beside him, holding the small rusted key they had recovered from Raymond's pocket. She glanced at Daniel, her voice firm but low. "This key belongs somewhere here." He wasn't just rambling. "There's something under this lake we haven't found." Daniel nodded. "If he's telling the truth, this key could open the final door, the one that tells us exactly what happened to the Coopers. Before leaving the FBI base, Daniel had studied the last few pages of Raymond's journal, trying to decode his cryptic language. One entry stood out. "When the water sleeps, the truth is revealed. Beneath the north wall of the lake, under the stones where the sun never lingers." "North wall," Daniel murmured now, looking across the cracked earth where the lake once stood. "He's talking about the rocky embankment." Carla followed his gaze. "If there's an entrance, it'll be hidden among the stones. We'll need to check every inch." With a small team of forensic specialists and local deputies, Daniel and Carla combed through the embankment. The area was a tangle of jagged rocks, old tree roots, and decades of debris. "Over here," called one of the deputies after nearly 2 hours of searching. Daniel and Carla hurried over. The deputy was crouched by a set of weather-worn stones, partially buried in mud. "Look at this," he said, brushing away the dirt to reveal the faint outline of a metal handle, corroded but still intact. Carla's heart skipped a beat. "That's it. It has to be." Daniel fitted the rusted key into the lock. It turned with a groan of protest, and a section of the rock wall creaked open, revealing a narrow, pitch-black tunnel. The tunnel was damp and claustrophobic, the walls slick with years of trapped moisture. Daniel led the way, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Carla followed close behind, the air growing colder with each step. "Smell that?" she whispered. It was faint, metallic, and bitter, like rust mixed with something far worse. Daniel didn't answer. He already knew what it meant. The tunnel opened into a cavern-like space reinforced with wooden beams. What they found inside made the entire team go silent. There were 4 wooden coffins, arranged in a row, each marked with hand-carved initials. TC, EC, MC, AC. Carla's breath caught. "Thomas. Elaine. Annie." Daniel swallowed hard, his voice quiet but steady. "We found them." With care and reverence, the forensic team opened the first coffin. Inside lay the remains of Thomas Cooper, dressed in the same work shirt he'd worn in the old family photos. His hands were clasped over his chest, as if someone had posed him deliberately. Each coffin told the same story. The family had been placed here with disturbing precision, as if in some twisted version of a burial ritual. A few of Annie's belongings, a rag doll and a tiny hair ribbon, were tucked beside her skeleton. Pinned to the inside of the final coffin's lid was a note, written in Raymond's uneven scrawl. "The water keeps them safe. The world is cruel, but the lake forgives." Carla stared at it, anger and grief rising in her chest. Safe? He murdered them and thought he was protecting them. Daniel's jaw clenched. He believed the lake needed them. It wasn't about ransom or revenge. It was about feeding his delusion. The team stood in the cavern, heads bowed, as Daniel radioed in their discovery. For over 45 years, the Cooper family had been a ghost story, a cold case that haunted the town of Maplewood. Now they would finally be laid to rest. Carla placed a hand on one of the coffins, her voice breaking. "We'll take you home now. All of you." That night, as the remains were carefully transported for proper identification and burial, Daniel sat at his desk staring at the photographs of the Coopers. He thought of Margaret, Elaine's sister, and the years she had spent fighting for answers. Carla walked in, her voice soft. "The lab confirmed it. The DNA matches. It's them." Daniel exhaled, the weight of the discovery both lifting and pressing on his chest. "This case, it's the reason I joined the Bureau. Cases like this. To give families answers." Carla nodded. "We gave them justice. Raymond Denton will never see daylight again." Raymond Denton sat in a holding cell, his wild gray hair falling into his face. When Daniel entered, Raymond smiled, a hollow, unsettling grin. "You found them," Raymond said. "The lake told me you would." Daniel sat across from him, his tone measured. "Why the Coopers, Raymond? Why them?" Raymond leaned forward, his voice a whisper. "Because they were perfect. Too perfect. And the lake doesn't like perfect things. It wanted them. I just delivered them." Daniel stared at him, feeling both disgust and pity. "You're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell, Raymond. The lake won't hear you there." Raymond only smiled. "The lake always hears." The next day, the town of Maplewood gathered as the Coopers were laid to rest beside the family's old home. Margaret wept openly as Daniel and Carla stood in the crowd, heads bowed. "They deserved better," Carla murmured. "They finally got peace," Daniel said softly. As the ceremony ended, Daniel looked out at the lakebed, now nothing but dry, cracked earth. For the first time in decades, the ghosts of that place felt a little quieter. The town of Maplewood hadn't seen this many people gathered in one place for decades. The memorial for the Cooper family was held in the town square, where an old oak tree stood like a silent witness to history. The remains of Thomas, Elaine, Mark, and Annie were laid in simple coffins, draped with white flowers. Daniel Reed stood toward the back of the crowd, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the case. Carla Hughes stood beside him, her expression soft but strained. For both of them, this was more than just another investigation. It had become a personal reckoning. Margaret, Elaine's sister, stood at the podium. Her trembling hands clutched a single sheet of paper, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. 45 years ago, my sister and her family vanished from this town. For years, I begged for someone to believe that something terrible had happened. Today, I stand here with gratitude, not because of what we've lost, but because someone finally listened. Daniel, Carla, and their team gave my family a voice again. Thank you. Her words pierced the air, and Daniel felt his throat tighten. He had been trained to remain detached, to see cases as puzzles rather than personal tragedies. But the Cooper case had broken that barrier. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Daniel found himself standing near the lake's edge. The drought had left the once deep waters as nothing more than a cracked expanse of earth. He imagined what it must have been like in 1980, the warm summer night, the sounds of laughter and life, all interrupted by one man's madness. Carla joined him, her gaze following his. It feels like the lake is empty now, like it's given up all its secrets. Daniel sighed. For 45 years, it held them. Every unanswered question. Every sleepless night for Margaret. And now, it's just quiet. Carla glanced at him, her tone gentle. You did what you came here to do, Daniel. You gave a family back to the people who loved them. The news of Raymond Denton's arrest spread quickly. His confession, though rambling and soaked in delusion, was enough to close the case definitively. He was awaiting trial in a federal facility, but Daniel knew that Denton would likely never see the inside of a courtroom. His mind was fractured beyond repair. During one of the final interrogations, Raymond had muttered something that stayed with Daniel. "You think I'm the only one? The lake has always taken. I just listened." The words haunted Daniel, though he pushed them aside. The Coopers' case was over, but Raymond's cryptic message felt like a shadow lingering over the town. That evening, Daniel visited Margaret's house. The front porch light flickered as she opened the door, her face weary but softer than he'd seen before. "I just wanted to check in," Daniel said. "See how you're holding up." Margaret smiled faintly. "Peace. For the first time in decades, I can sleep knowing where they are. Thank you for not giving up, Agent Reed. I know you could have closed this case like the others before you, but you didn't." Daniel nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You deserved answers. So did they." Back at the field office, Carla sat across from Daniel, a coffee in her hand. "You know," she began, "this case wasn't just about finding them. It was about seeing the worst and still believing in the good. Margaret never stopped believing. And neither did you." Daniel looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I think I needed this case more than I realized. It reminded me why I do this job. Not for the headlines. Not for the statistics. But for people like Margaret." Carla smiled, tilting her head. "And for families like the Coopers. They'll never be forgotten now." A week later, a small ceremony was held where the Cooper home once stood. The old house had long since been torn down, but a memorial plaque was placed in its place. In memory of Thomas, Elaine, Mark, and Annie Cooper, a family lost, but never forgotten. Daniel stood there for a long time, the wind carrying the faint scent of rain. He placed a single white rose at the base of the plaque, a silent promise that he would carry their story with him. Carla joined him, and for a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like peace. As Daniel and Carla prepared to leave Maplewood, the sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light over the lake bed. Daniel glanced back at the town one last time. "Think we'll ever come back here, Carla?" Daniel shrugged, a small, knowing smile on his face. "Maybe, but I think the Cooper story is finally where it belongs, in the past, but never forgotten." The two agents drove away, the road winding through the quiet woods, leaving behind a town that would always remember the summer of 1980, and the answers finally unearthed in 2025. The following spring, heavy rains swept across Maplewood. The cracked earth of Lake Echo began to fill again, the water creeping back into the spaces where silence had once ruled. By late May, the lake shimmered under the sunlight, its surface calm and deceptively beautiful. Daniel Reed had long since returned to Washington, working on other cases, but Maplewood lingered in his mind. Every so often, he would catch himself thinking of Raymond Denton's final words. "You think I'm the only one? The lake has always taken. I just listened." He had dismissed them as the delusions of a man who had lived too long in darkness. But deep down, a small, unshakable part of him wondered if Raymond meant something more. On a warm afternoon in June, Daniel received a call from Carla Hughes. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice tight. "The rains filled the lake, and the search team found something else, something we didn't know was there." Daniel's stomach tightened. "What is it?" "They found another structure," Carla said. "A small rowboat drifted into a cove at the north end. When divers went down, they discovered a submerged cellar door. It's old, Daniel. Older than anything Denton built. We think it predates the Coopers by decades." A week later, Daniel stood once again on the banks of Lake Echo, watching as divers surfaced with artifacts. They brought up rusted chains, fragments of wooden furniture, and something chilling, a set of child-sized shoes wrapped in oilskin, dated to the 1960s. Carla stood beside him, her face pale. "If this is what I think it is, Raymond Denton wasn't the beginning. There's a pattern here, Daniel. Children disappeared from surrounding counties long before the Coopers, cases that were never connected." Daniel's mind raced. Could the Denton family have been carrying on something older? A ritual? A sickness passed down through generations? That night, Daniel visited Raymond Denton in the psychiatric wing of the federal prison. The old man sat hunched in a chair, his eyes distant. When Daniel approached, Raymond smiled faintly. "You went back to the lake. Raymond said, his voice cracking. Daniel didn't answer. I told you, Raymond whispered. I'm just one of many. The lake, it calls to people like me. It always has. Back in his hotel room, Daniel couldn't sleep. He spread out old newspaper clippings on the bed, headlines from 1965, 1952, even as far back as 1930. Each told a similar story: family vanishes near Lake Echo. 2 boys disappear, no trace found. Was it coincidence? Or had the lake been a magnet for darkness long before the Dentons ever arrived? Carla knocked on his door, holding 2 cups of coffee. You're thinking the same thing I am, she said. This isn't just one man's madness. Something about this place, it's cursed. On his last day in Maplewood, Daniel stood on the dock, watching the rippling water. The sun set behind the hills, casting golden light across the lake's surface. For a moment, he thought he saw something, a faint, pale handprint pressed against the underside of the water, there and gone in an instant. He blinked and it was gone. Ready to go? Carla called from the car. Daniel hesitated, his eyes lingering on the lake. Yeah, he said finally. Let's go. As they drove away, the waters of Lake Echo rolled quietly, as if holding back a secret that no one was meant to uncover. In the quiet town of Maplewood, the shadows of 1980 have finally lifted, yet the whispers of Lake Echo will never truly fade. The Cooper family story is a reminder that time cannot erase truth. It only buries it, waiting for someone brave enough to dig it out. As the sun sets over the water, their spirits rest, not as victims of darkness, but as symbols of resilience and love. Justice came late, but it came, proving that even after decades of silence, a single voice of determination can bring light to the darkest corners of history. If this story gave you chills, drop a comment with your thoughts below. And if you want more real-life mysteries like this, subscribe now and check out the next video waiting for you on the screen. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.